Stanford University.
In this video, I'm going to talk to you about building the co-founding team. And there are three aspects of this that I want to discuss. The first is, how big of a team should I form? How many co-founders should I have? The second is, what characteristics should I look for in co-founders? And the third is, what are the sources? Where should I look for co-founders? So first of all, how big of a team? Even the largest of companies today started out as a relatively small co-founding team. So what we find looking statistically at many startup firms is that larger co-founding teams tend to do better. There's a tendency for entrepreneurs to not bring in enough people early on. Perhaps it's an effort to try and keep more of the equity for oneself, but larger teams tend to do better. For the purposes of this class, I'm asking you to form teams of approximately 3 to 4 people. So there can be a problem of having too large of a founding team. If teams get too big, then this can slow down decision making and generate problems of people not pulling their weight and contributing enough. But overall, entrepreneurs tend to form teams that are too small. So we see statistical results here of the likelihood of having an initial public offering, an IPO. So we'll talk more about what this means, but it's one success measure for high-tech startups. And so what we see here is, as we might expect, venture capital-backed firms have a higher likelihood of an IPO. But what do we see in terms of the team? Teams that have co-founders that have a higher number of prior positions on the team tend to do better. Larger founding teams tend to also do better, so we see positive and significant coefficients here. The functional diversity of the founding team tends to also be associated with higher performance. Functional diversity means the number of different functional roles you have on the team. So these could include engineering, sales, marketing, finance, operations, etc. Also, we see that, importantly, having prior startup experience, so having a co-founder who has done this before leads to a much greater likelihood of success. And having people on the team who have prior senior management experience also gives a large and positive effect. Interestingly, if there are overlapping prior affiliations, so co-founders who have worked together at the same company and might have better ways and better knowledge of how to work together with one another, tend to do better also. So these results show similar charts, but for the likelihood of raising venture capital funding. So what type of teams are more likely to raise VC funding? Again, those that have a greater number of prior positions on the team. The founding team size still helps, but not quite as much. And having prior startup experience or someone with management experience on the team also seems to help your likelihood of raising venture capital. We'll talk more about raising venture capital in a later video, in a later section of the course, but I wanted to at least point out these results here.
But there is one decision that stands orders of magnitude above everything else. And that is, who is the team that you surround yourself with? Now, commonplace wisdom would say, oh, I know the answer to this. Surround yourself with great people. Surround yourself with the A team. It doesn't get any better than that. But is that really enough? Is that even relevant? I mean, I ask each of you in this room to look around you. Just look around you. This is the A team. Unless I have my statistics wrong, this year, unfortunately for incoming freshmen, your chances of getting in are probably 1 in 30 in the main applicant pool, not the early pool. So if that isn't a screen for the A team, I'm not sure what is. Does that mean that you should start a company with the 3 people who are sitting next to you and be guaranteed that that would be a success? Well, Stanford has done the screen for you. Shouldn't that be a success? Well, let's take an analogy. Let's take the roommate analogy. Well, hey, everyone seems to be normal. Everyone seems to be a hard worker. Everyone is certainly intelligent. Everyone's creative. So let's just put 4 people together as roommates. It's going to work. No problems. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it starts with the accusations. Is that my sweater? Hey, did you drink the milk in the fridge? And then it degrades to a total destruction and a lack of eye contact, the avoidance in the room, and then the countdown of days left in the quarter semester till you can get the blank out of there. Well, in a rooming situation, you can get out of there. That's not that easy in a founding situation, especially when you've started the company together, you've split the stock. And so the selection process of the team is really critical. And it's not good enough to simply say who's an A player. It really is important for you to think about values, core values that you share as an individual, no different than a relationship versus a roommate. Right? Core values surrounding a lot of things: trust, commitment, goals. What are your goals for the venture? When do you say, I've met my goals, and someone else says, wait, we're not even close? What does commitment mean? What does success mean? How do you define success? Do each of you have a common understanding of what the definition of success is? Because you wouldn't want one person saying, hey, we're successful, and the other person saying, we failed. So you need to talk about these things up front in the screen. It's really, really critical. I can probably draw the analogy that it's more like a mountaineering expedition than a roommate search. We are talking about co-dependence. Who is on the other end of the rope? Who do you trust to be on the other end of the rope? What happens when the unforeseen occurs, which it's going to? Or even worse, what happens when tragedy befalls? Who can you count on? Who's still going to be there? Who's going to run for the hills? Who's going to give up? And there is no other time to think about this than the time of inception in startup. As you choose your team, you don't want to be going back and rejiggering and dealing with these issues 6 months, a year later.
And so you see, this is a really important decision, perhaps one of the most important decisions that you're going to make regarding the ultimate fate of your startup, which is who are you going to add on the co-founding team. And so we want to be careful about not only the skills that you're bringing into the team, but also about the interpersonal and team dynamics there. And so who should you look for? So one of the biggest factors is if you can find someone who has successful startup experience in your particular industry. These people bring a much greater likelihood of succeeding again. So if someone has experience, you want that to especially be in the particular sector and industry that you're in, so that they have that network, they have that prior experience, they know how the industry works and what customers want. The second thing is, as Mark alluded to, you want people who have the same vision and the same passion. You want to be on the same page about why it is that you're doing this and what the goal is. Next, you want skills that complement and match your venture strategy and the industry that you're in. You want someone who you can work well with. And so this may be people who you've worked together with in the past, but it also might be someone new. You definitely want the best person for the job, but you want to know that you can work well with them. And then finally, I think that a lot of teams do better when you can combine someone who's the creative visionary with someone who's more the down-to-earth operations. Let's step by step figure out what we need to accomplish to get this done. Those two pieces, I think, are really critical to bring together. And so in some of my own research, I've looked at what the characteristics are of the optimal team composition. And so one important thing is that this depends a lot on the industry that you're in and how it works, and also what strategy you're taking as a venture. And so these statistics show the likelihood that you achieve a good exit. So this could be in terms of merger and acquisition that makes money for the entrepreneur and the investors, or it could be in terms of an initial public offering, an IPO. And so what we see here is this column is just the control variables. But if we look here at columns 2 and 3, we see that those who have a more diverse team, so those who have more different functions on the team, so these could be engineering, marketing, sales, operations, tend to do better overall. But more diverse teams, if you're choosing an innovation strategy, more diverse teams tend to do worse. So these are hazard ratios. So number below 1 represents a decreased likelihood of a good exit. So if you're taking a really high-tech, high-innovation strategy, it can be better to start with a founding team that's more technically focused. And this is what we see in this next regression that shows that overall a technically focused team doesn't outperform. But when taking an innovation strategy, a tech-focused firm has a much greater likelihood of achieving a good exit. So if your firm is doing something really high-tech, then there might be less for sales and marketing people to do, and it might be more important to have a very engineering and technically focused founding team in the beginning. Similarly, we can talk about different types of industry environments. And so one way to categorize this is environments where you're competing with industry incumbents. So this could be software, internet, electronics, versus industries where you tend to partner with industry incumbents. So this could be biotech, chemicals, medical devices, industries where you might create the core innovation, but then you tend to compete with other startups to partner and cooperate with a large established firm to bring that innovation to market. And so as you might expect, if you're going to compete head-to-head in the product market with industry incumbents, in the competitive industry scenario, then it's much better to have a more diverse team. You're going to need those functions of sales, marketing, operations, in addition to the technical roles. But if you're in a more cooperative industry where you're going to tend to partner with established firms for the distribution, sales, and marketing, then having a more diverse founding team is less important. And actually having a more technically focused founding team in these competitive environments is going to give you a significant advantage. And so again, to reiterate, if you're in a competitive environment where you're competing with industry incumbents, then having a more diverse team is going to tend to do better, and having a technically focused team doesn't improve your chances. But if you're in a cooperative industry where you're going to wind up partnering with a large industry incumbent for the sales, marketing, distribution, etc., then having a more technically focused team that's just focused on getting your innovation done, getting the product development completed, can be to your advantage. And so the final thing I wanted to talk about is, where do you find these co-founders? What are the sources? How should you go about looking for co-founders in your startup? There are a number of sources. One could be at Stanford or at your university. Another could be angel investors or venture capitalists. You could talk to professors in your field about former students who they know or industry contacts that they have who are entrepreneurial. It could be your professional network, people you've worked with in the past, or ideally it could be a recently cashed out entrepreneur who's in your industry. So someone who started a similar business and recently sold it successfully. But the key is you want to look for people who you would work well together with, who have a similar vision, and people not necessarily who have done well in a large company context, but people who have also been entrepreneurial and who would do well in a scrappy, small startup environment. And so these are the things that I wanted to talk to you about building the team. We'll talk more about team building and culture in a later video.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.